I'm going to invite Brother Phil Jamieson now to come to the pulpit. We introduced him earlier. He is an ordained elder in our conference and serves our conference through the United Methodist Foundation. Phil, welcome. Congregation, will you give him your warm welcome this morning? With you, it's probably where it's at. Okay. All
right. It is a joy and a pleasure to be with you today, and it looks like it was providential to be here today with Roger struggling a little bit with his voice. It happens. I think, it maybe doesn't look like work, but it is work trying to lead worship and be up front, and it does take a toll on your voice sometimes. I pastored for about 11 years, and I suppose it's like many things. You don't fully appreciate all that you have until you no longer are doing it all the time. And I always try whenever I'm in the pulpit just to recognize just what a joy it is to be able to share the gospel. And what a privilege it is to be able to talk about the good things of God and how much God does love you and loves us all. So I thank you for this time to be with you. There's a story that's told of a prosperous young investment banker who was driving a new BMW on a mountain road during a snowstorm. As he veered around one sharp turn, he lost control of the car, and the car started to slide towards a precipice. At the last moment, he unbuckled his seatbelt, flung open the door, and jumped clear of the car, even as it tumbled down the ravine and burst into flame. Though he'd escaped with his life, the man suffered a terrible injury. Somehow his arm had been caught near the hinge of the door as he jumped, and it was torn off at the shoulder. A trucker saw the accident in his rearview mirror. He pulled his rig to a halt and ran to see if he could help the man. He found the banker standing at the roadside, looking down at the BMW that was now burning at the bottom of the gully. And he kept saying, "My BMW, my new BMW." He moaned, oblivious to his injury. Well, the trucker pointed at the banker where his arm used to be and said, "Buddy, you got a lot worse trouble than that. Let me see if we can find your arm, and then maybe the surgeon can reattach it." And the banker looked at where his arm had used to be, paused a moment, then he started to say, "Oh, my Rolex. Oh, my Rolex." Some folks really do have their priorities out of whack at times, don't they? We can get so caught up in the acquisition of nice things that we begin to lose touch with the things that really do matter. Our banker friend is an exaggeration, but we all know folks who lose perspective about the acquisition of things at times, don't we? Maybe that even would describe us from time to time. We have before us this morning one of the most famous passages in the entire Old Testament. Now, I know Brother Roger has been leading you through Genesis and Exodus, so it kind of falls on me to come up with something on the Ten Commandments. But I'm happy to have that opportunity. The Decalogue, the great summary of the law, is God's wonderful gift to Israel. It's far more than a moral code. It's a revelation of the very life of God, because it helps Israel come to understand Him in a new way. The commandments are a gift to Israel because they help them, Israel, and they help us come to understand that the God who saves us also desires us to shape our lives so that we might truly enjoy our salvation. Did you catch that? We're not saved by keeping the commandments. That's already been done by God, just like He had done it when He led them out of Egypt. But He gives us a way to live so that we might actually enjoy the salvation that the Lord provides for us. So that's the first point that we need to make. Israel is not saved by keeping the law. They've already been saved. That's already occurred. But the commandments reveal the type of life that you and I are called to live in response to the salvation that has been given to us. So now, where do you begin with this remarkable text? Some of the greatest preachers in church history have written volumes on it. Augustine and Luther and Calvin all have preached many, many sermons. Wesley preached on these texts. So many, many great preachers over the centuries have preached on the Ten Commandments. What more can be said about so much? Well, I'm going to narrow down our focus this morning because I'm assuming that you would like to get home sometime today. I'm right? Okay, I thought so. As a matter of fact, for the sake of time, we're going to jump down to the last commandment. You know, the one about coveting. It's kind of an old-fashioned word, isn't it? It means passionately desiring, and in the original Hebrew, the verb probably also means to desire with the full intention of getting it. Not only are you wanting it, but you're putting all your energy into acquiring it as well. So there's a lot loaded into that word covet. It's more than just wishing. It's more than just thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice? It's actively, purposely wanting something that you do not have. Well, on the other hand, though, it does seem a little harsh, doesn't it? Adultery, stealing, and murder, sure, those are understandable. We get those, obviously, why God's against that. Lying and swearing and mistreating your parents, of course. Those things are all wrong. We understand that. But what's so bad about a little coveting? This commandment really takes it up a notch. The first 9 commandments all deal with external actions, things that you're doing, things that you can be observed doing. But this one, here with this coveting business, we're talking about attitudes. We're talking about our inner life. We're talking about things that maybe we could even be doing right now while the preacher's preaching. Don't we have some kind of right to privacy? Here, God doesn't even want me to think about having things that might really give me the good life, a much better life, maybe a life that I really more richly deserve. What's so bad about a little coveting? I'm glad you asked. Coveting, as we find it here in the 10 Commandments, implies a dissatisfaction with life. It is the belief that my life, that your life cannot be complete until I have, until you have, well, fill in the blank. Coveting is the failure to recognize how blessed we already are. Did you hear that? Coveting is the failure to recognize how blessed we really are. Coveting is the eternal fool's quest of believing that peace and joy can be discovered in things. And ultimately, that means that this is the problem. To break the 10th commandment implies that I've already broken the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. For to place our final satisfaction and happiness in anything or anyone other than God is, in essence, to have another God. And to have another God means that in the end, and this is the way it always ends, to have another God other than the true God means that our hearts will be broken. Because that God cannot provide for us what we most deeply desire. That other God, that false God, can never give to us the deep desires of our heart. Because you and I are made in such a way, as Augustine said, that our hearts are restless until they finally rest in God. Ultimate satisfaction cannot be had in anyone or anything else, be it as crass as a BMW or a Rolex, or anything else that we would put before God. And there's no escaping this problem by saying, well, this is the Old Testament, right? Didn't Jesus save us from all those Old Testament rules and laws? Well, we Christians don't really get off quite that easily, because just like Moses, the Jewish man, there was another Jewish man who talking from a mount, in this case, the Sermon on the Mount, this other Jewish man says, no one can serve 2 masters. But a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. By the way, that other Jewish man, as I hope you already realize, is Jesus, speaking in Matthew 6:24, if you're taking notes. No, you and I, as Christians, must pay attention and recognize our restlessness, our penchant for longing for things that don't have the power to save us. Well, so what do folks like us do? If this describes you, it describes me sometimes, that's for sure, but if this describes you, what are we to do then? How do we then live in a culture where you and I are bombarded all the time by messages that our life is not complete until we have this type of car, or we have that type of house with a certain square footage? What are we going to do when all the time we're being told that you really don't measure up until you get this? All the time. How do we guard our hearts from being seduced by all the things that are available to us? How do we keep perspective and remember again that our triune God really is sufficient for what we need? Well, the answer actually is quite simple. We change our attitudes by changing our actions. You know, think about it this way, and really any good behavioral therapist will tell you this. If you want to change the way you think, it's hard to do that because our emotions are related to other things. So the way that we change, ultimately the way we think, is by acting differently. You've maybe heard this. Has Brother Roger or any other preacher maybe told Brother Johnson, anybody else ever tell you that when you're struggling with liking somebody or maybe just really kind of hate them, you've been told, well, pray for them? Have you ever heard that? It's true. It's pretty much impossible to hate somebody while you're praying for them. So what's happened? You didn't change your feeling and your thinking by directly going after it. It changed because you were acting differently towards that person. Sometimes when folks have marriage trouble, they'd come in and talk to the preacher. Well, I just don't feel about her the same way I used to, the man will say, or the woman may say it. And so the challenge is, well, are you willing to act differently towards her, towards him? Because our feelings follow our behaviors and not vice versa. So how then do we act if we really want to get beyond coveting? What can we do that will to allow us to not be desiring and to really, and again by desiring I mean that we until we have this, we don't believe we can be good people. Until we have this, we can't be fulfilled. How do we get beyond that? What can we do? Again, I'm glad you asked. The primary practice that can save us from placing our hope in things is giving. When we join a United Methodist Church, we make a promise to support the church by giving. So we say we will give our prayers, we will give our time in volunteering, we'll give our witness, we'll share our story about the good things God is doing in our lives, and also we'll give some money. The act of giving money is a way, a big way, a primary way in which you and I can resist covetousness by showing that we can share. We can limit our purchasing potential by giving. Consistent giving can help us be free of covetous thinking by aiding us to realize that we can be happy here and now even without having certain things. Giving allows us the freedom to be satisfied with what we have and to acknowledge that the true God always has the power to provide for us. Now let me say this. The Bell Springs United Methodist Church is dependent upon your generous gifts. So keep those cards and letters coming in. Keep giving. Keep giving. Church is dependent upon the voluntary giving of its members and friends. But you need to know something else. I need to know this else. Brother Roger needs to know this. All of us need to know this. As much as the church needs us to give, you and I actually have a far greater need to give. Did you hear that? As much as the church needs our gifts, You and I can't really be the people that deep in our hearts we want to be if we do not give. It's just the way it works. We begin, when we give, to have a remarkable sense of gratitude. In our giving, we begin to realize, when we have gratitude, that what we have is enough. Now listen, I like to have nice things. I would imagine most of us in this room like to have nice things. There's nothing wrong, I don't believe, with having nice things. The problem is, though, when we come to believe that we cannot be satisfied, that we cannot live the good life until we get that. That's the spirit of covetousness. And ultimately, that's the spirit of idolatry that says, this is more important to me, this thing is more important to me than anything else. Let me tell you a story and then I'll be done. One day, a wealthy executive visited a lake to see about buying another home. When he got to the shore, he was disturbed to find a fisherman who was sitting lazily beside his boat. "Why aren't you out there fishing?" the man said. "Well, because I've caught enough fish for the day," the fisherman replied. "Well, why don't you catch more fish than you need?" "Well, what would I do with them?" "Well, you could earn more money," came the insistent reply, "and buy a better boat so you could go deeper out there into the lake, and then you could maybe buy some new nets and catch even more fish and make even more money. Soon you'd have a whole fleet of boats, and then you could be rich like me." The fisherman asked, "Well, then what would I do?" "Well, then you could sit down and enjoy life." "What do you think I'm doing now?" said the fisherman. Brothers and sisters, you and I will never know the secret of true happiness until we learn that it's not discovered by acquiring. It's discovered in giving. And the reason for that is simply this. You and I are created in the image of God. You know that, don't you? You're created in the image of God. And our God is a giver and not a taker. How do we know that? Because we know that God loves us so much that not only did he give us the 10 Commandments, but best of all, he gave us himself. God is a giver. He gives us far more than we can ever hope or dream. Brothers and sisters, I want to encourage you to find satisfaction in the gift of Jesus Christ. Find satisfaction in the good life that God is giving you. Find satisfaction in such a way that you are empowered then to give and to share some of the blessings that God has given you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.